Tuesday started the way most Tuesdays do when you live in Vancouver, gray, damp, and slightly behind schedule before it even begins. I had exactly 22 minutes before my first call, enough time for coffee, barely enough time for anything else. I grabbed my jacket off the chair, pulled the door shut behind me, and headed down the block toward Groundwork, the little cafe on West 4th I had been going to for 2 years. Same route, same order, same counter guy named Paul who never asked how I was doing, which I actually appreciated. Except when I got there, the door was locked. A handwritten note taped to the glass. Temporary closure. Plumbing emergency. We'll be back Thursday. Sorry for the inconvenience. I stood there longer than necessary. The rain had just started again, that soft Vancouver drizzle that is not quite light enough to ignore, and I had no backup plan because I had never needed one. Groundwork was just always open. I checked my phone. 19 minutes now. I started walking. There was a place 2 blocks over I had passed maybe a dozen times. Anchor and Grind. I had noticed it the way you notice things you never actually enter. The dark green awning, the fogged up windows in winter, the kind of interior that looks deliberately unbothered. I pushed the door open and got in the short line. The woman ahead of me ordered without looking at the menu, oatmeal cortado, no syrup. Her voice was even, like she had given that order so many times it no longer required effort. She had dark hair pulled back loosely, a gray wool coat, and she was already looking at her phone before the cashier had finished typing. I looked at my own phone. Checked nothing, put it away. When she stepped aside to wait, she stood near the end of the counter, close enough that I caught the edge of a conversation she was half having with herself, something quietly muttered about a file that had not loaded. She tapped her phone once against her palm, gave it a resigned look, and set it face down on the counter. I ordered my Americano. Then, before I could think about it too carefully, I said, and hers too, and nodded in her direction. The cashier looked at me. She looked at me. Her expression did not change right away. It moved in stages. First a kind of mild calculation, then something harder to name. You don't have to do that, she said. I know. So why? I had no answer that would not sound either too smooth or too honest, so I said, you look like your morning was already losing. She studied me for a moment. That's an odd thing to say to a stranger. Probably, I said. She picked up her cortado when it came, held it for a second, then said, thank you, in the tone of someone who does not thank people easily. Like the words cost something, and she was paying anyway. I got my Americano and left for my call. The whole thing had taken maybe 4 minutes. I thought about her exactly once during the day, briefly, in the space between 2 meetings. Then, not again. I went back to Anchor and Grind the next morning. I told myself it was because the coffee was good. It was fine coffee. Not better than Groundwork, honestly, but fine. There was street parking nearby, and it was not much farther out of my way if I adjusted the route slightly, which I did, without acknowledging why. She was not there. I went Thursday and Friday. On Friday, I stood in line looking at the window seat like a man waiting for a bus he already knows he missed, and felt the specific embarrassment of someone who cannot explain their own behavior even to themselves. I did not know her name. I knew her coffee order and that she had dark hair and said thank you like it required a small act of will. That was it. On Saturday, I almost stayed home. I went anyway. The cafe was quieter on weekends. A couple near the back with a stroller. Someone on a laptop near the power outlet. The rain had finally stopped, and gray light came through the front windows at a low angle. I stepped inside and looked toward the counter before I had consciously decided to. She was there. Same seat near the window. Not a table she had claimed by chance, but one that had the look of a regular position. Coat over the chair beside her. A paper cup already in hand. No laptop this time. Just a small notebook, closed, and a pen resting on top of it. She looked up the moment I came through the door. Not when I reached the counter. The moment I came in. I ordered my coffee and stood there deciding whether to walk over. I had no good reason. I had bought her one coffee. She had said thank you. That was a complete interaction. Whatever I did next would be something else, and I was aware of that. I walked over anyway. This is going to come out wrong, I said. She looked up from the notebook, which she had opened in the 30 seconds since I arrived. Her eyes moved over my face with the unhurried attention of someone who was not easily surprised by anything. Does it usually? Not usually, just when I am doing something I do not have a prepared explanation for. And what are you doing? Standing here. She looked at me for another moment. Then she said, sit down if you want. I'm not using that chair. I sat across from her. She did not make a thing of it, just glanced back at her notebook and wrote one line, then set the pen down. You came back, she said. The coffee is good. It's fine. She said it without looking up. You came back Wednesday too. I stopped. How do you know that? She picked up her cortado, took a slow sip. I'll tell you at some point. Not later. At some point. It was a very specific choice of words, and I noticed it immediately. Her name was Rowan Kessler. She was a structural engineer, worked with an independent firm downtown, had been in Vancouver for 6 years after moving from Halifax. She told me these things without the usual preamble people use when they are deciding how much to give away. No, what do you do as an opener? No reciprocal questioning that pretends to be interested but is really just trading credentials. She just said things, and the way she said them suggested she had already decided which things to say before I sat down. I told her I did brand and communications consulting, mostly mid-sized tech companies, occasionally nonprofits when the project was interesting enough. She asked what made a project interesting. I said, when the problem is real and they have actually admitted that to themselves. She thought about that for a second and said, fair answer. We talked for 40 minutes. I was late to a client check-in and did not particularly care. When I finally stood up to go, she did not offer her number and I did not ask. Something about the exchange felt like it had its own logic and I did not want to interrupt that by making it formal. On Sunday, she was not there. Monday, I tried to go back to groundwork and lasted 1 block before I turned around. The table by the window became a reference point. Not something I said out loud, not something I named, but something I quietly organized my mornings around. I started arriving closer to 9. She was almost always there first, cortado beside her, notebook open, the pen always resting at a particular angle that looked more deliberate than accidental. We did not make plans. It just kept happening, and neither of us pointed that out. After about 2 weeks, she stopped writing when I sat down. She did not announce this or make a gesture out of it. One morning I arrived, she had the notebook open and the pen in her hand, and then she set it down and did not pick it up again. I noticed. I could tell she knew I noticed. Nothing was said about it. She remembered specifics I had mentioned once, a difficult client in Burnaby, the fact that I had grown up in Thunder Bay and never quite gotten over the light here, being softer, that I took my coffee black, but only because I had stopped trusting my own taste and sweetness. That last one she brought back 2 weeks later, exactly. You still avoiding sweetness decisions? I laughed before I could catch it. She was precise in everything, kept a physical planner with colored tabs, did not answer her phone before 8:30 unless there was a site emergency, and even then preferred a text first. She described this not as a preference, but as a system, which told me more about how she thought than most people manage in an hour of conversation. One morning, I told her work had started to feel like performance, not in a dramatic way, just that I was good at it and that it started to feel like the problem, that I could walk into any room and say the right things, and I could not remember the last time I had not known what the right things were. Rowan was quiet for a moment. She stirred her coffee, even though there was nothing left to stir. Then she said, the version of yourself that got good at it might not be the version that wanted to be good at it. I looked at her. That's uncomfortably close to something I didn't say out loud. You said it, she said, just quietly. That should have been harder to hear. Instead, I found myself wanting her to keep going. By late November, the mornings felt less like something I had stumbled into and more like something I had quietly chosen. She had that effect. She made you feel like your choices were more deliberate than they were, which was either reassuring or unsettling depending on the day. That Thursday, she came in later than usual, her hair still damp at the ends, the particular tension in her jaw. That meant the morning had already asked too much of her. I asked if she wanted to talk about it. She said no. Then 30 seconds later, she told me about a structural review that had come back requiring a full revision, months of work, because a contractor had submitted the wrong load specs and her firm had signed off without catching it. Are you in trouble? I asked. Professionally, manageable, she said. Personally, I am furious at myself. You caught it now. Late is not the same as on time. She was hard on herself in the precise way that people who have never been able to afford a mistake are hard on themselves. I did not push it, but I stayed another hour past when I should have. There was a firm event that evening, one of those industry mixer things at a hotel downtown where everyone stands in a circle and pretends the conversation is better than it is. My firm had bought 2 tickets and the other one was going unused. I had been planning to skip it. Then, at some point in that extra hour, I heard myself saying, I have a thing tonight. A lot of people talking about synergy and not meaning it. I could use someone who would find it as useless as I do. Rowan looked at me. That's not a great pitch. It's an honest one. A pause. She looked at the closed notebook on the table. Then, what's the dress code? The event was at the Rosewood Hotel, Georgia downtown. She arrived just after I did. Dark blazer, slacks, hair down for the first time. I registered all of it faster than I meant to, and then tried to look like I had not. She noticed. Don't overthink it, she said, which was exactly what she said to me in the cafe the first morning, and I wondered briefly if she used the same phrases deliberately, or if they were just hers. Inside, the room was exactly what I had described. 30 people in a space meant for 20, everyone holding a drink they did not really want. The particular acoustic texture of forced networking, laughing at the right times, questions shaped like statements. Rowan moved through it differently than I expected, not warm exactly, but effective. She asked people questions they actually had to think about. A VP of operations near the bar launched into a long explanation of his company's Q3 challenges, and she said, "What did you learn that you already knew?" and watched him figure out whether that was rude or insightful. He decided insightful. I could have predicted that from 20 feet away. A man in a very good suit cornered me near the canapes and talked for 10 minutes about vertical integration without once asking what I did. I watched Rowan across the room, waiting for the moment she would disengage. When she finally got loose, she appeared beside me and said, simply, "Walk with me," and I excused myself before the sentence was finished. We ended up near the windows that looked out over Georgia Street. The city lit up below the early December dark, and for a while, neither of us said anything about the room behind us. She said the VP had been smarter than he appeared. I said the suit guy had been less smart than he thought. She said, usually the way. Then I said her name, just Rowan. I had planned nothing after that. Whatever I had intended to say dissolved the moment she turned toward me. You should finish that sentence, she said. I lost it. Then start a different one. I did not, but she was looking at me in a way that was different from the cafe. Less measured, less like she was deciding what to tell me next. I was aware of the distance between us, which was not much, and then she said quietly, "We should go." The cab ride down Burrard was quiet. The city moved past the window in orange and white. At some point near the bridge, she shifted slightly and her shoulder was against mine, and neither of us moved away from that. At her building in Kitsilano, she stood by the entrance with her key already in her hand. She looked at me steadily. "Do you want to come up?" No hesitation in it, no uncertainty, just the question. "Yes," I said. She unlocked the door and I followed her in, and it did not feel sudden. It felt like all those mornings had been pointing at exactly this, and we had both been pretending not to read the direction. The next morning, I expected something to be strange. I woke up in Rowan's apartment, east-facing bedroom, pale winter light, the specific quiet of a place where someone lives alone and has organized it exactly to their own preferences. I expected at least a few minutes of that careful, over-polite energy that happens when things shift fast. But Rowan was already in the kitchen when I got up, barefoot, wearing a gray crew neck, pouring water into a pour-over with the focus of someone who had a system for this too. She did not look up immediately. Then she did and said, "Americano okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Thank you." She nodded and went back to the pour-over. We sat at her kitchen table and talked for a while about everything adjacent to what had happened. The event, a terrible speech from the keynote speaker, the suit guy who turned out to have given Rowan a business card with 3 different titles printed on it. She laughed once, properly, and then seemed briefly surprised by it, like she had not meant to do that in front of me. When I got up to leave, she walked me to the door. I was searching for the right thing to say, something that acknowledged what the night had been, without making it sound like I was already negotiating the terms of it. Before I got there, she said, "Same time Monday." Anchoring grind? I asked. Unless you found better. I haven't. Same time then. I believed her. Monday, her chair was empty. I ordered my coffee and sat in mine and answered some emails and kept looking at the door. She did not come. Tuesday, the same. Wednesday, I went to groundwork instead, stood there for 60 seconds and came back to anchor and grind because I did not know what else to do with myself. Her chair was empty. I started replaying things. Not in a paranoid way. More like someone trying to find where the math stopped working. The cab ride home from the hotel. Her kitchen table in the morning. Same time Monday. I had not misheard it. I had not built it into something it was not. It had been direct, which was the only way she ever said things. On Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. No greeting, just an address and a time. Ankara, 7 o'clock. I stared at it for a while, then I replied, okay. Ankara was a restaurant on Burrard near the water, not quiet, but the kind of place where the noise stays at a level that lets you hear the person across from you. I had been once for a client dinner. Roland was already there when I arrived, corner table, a glass of water in front of her, menu closed. Hi, she said. Hi. I sat down. The silence between us was not the cafe kind, it had weight. She looked at the table, then at me. I did that badly, she said. Disappearing after telling me same time, Monday. Yes. The waiter came. We ordered. When he left, she placed both hands flat on the table, which I had seen her do once before when she was trying to be exact about something difficult. I manage my exposure, she said. My work, my time, how much of myself I let into something. I have reasons for doing it that way. And I was exposure. You were unexpected, she said, which is worse. I waited. My parents ran a contracting business, she said. For most of my childhood, things were fine. Then my father expanded too fast, took on a partner he had not vetted properly, and in about 18 months they lost most of it. We lost the house. My mother worked 3 jobs for 4 years. She said it flatly, without reaching for sympathy in the words, but her hands tightened slightly on the table. I decided very young that I would not be the kind of person things happened to because I had been careless. So you made systems, I said. I made systems, she said. They work. Until they don't. She looked at me for a moment. Until they don't. I told her some things too, more than I had planned to, about Thunder Bay, about taking the consulting track because I was good at it before I had asked whether I wanted it, about the way competence can become a kind of trap. You keep performing it because the performance is easier than figuring out what you would do instead. At one point, her hand moved across the table and rested briefly on mine. Then she pulled it back, like the honesty had startled her and she was recalibrating. By the time we stepped outside onto Burrard, the night had gotten colder, the harbor invisible in the dark behind the buildings. I was about to say something about getting dinner again soon, some easy forward gesture, when she said, "There's something else I need to tell you." My stomach shifted before I understood why. What? I said. She looked at the sidewalk for a moment, then at me. The first morning at Anchor and Grind was not an accident. I did not say anything. I knew who you were before you walked in, she said. Your firm had come up in a conversation about a project my company was considering. I looked you up. Your work, some public talks, your LinkedIn. Enough to understand roughly what your schedule looked like. My schedule, I said. Groundwork posted about the closure the night before on their Instagram. I guessed where you might go. Anchor and Grind was the closest option in the right direction. She kept her eyes on mine. I positioned myself there. The seat, the timing, all of it. The street noise kept going around us. A couple walked past. Somewhere down the block a streetcar made its mechanical sound against the rails. The coffee, I said finally. That was you, she said. I did not plan that part. I looked away, down the wet street toward the harbor lights. Everything I had filed under coincidence was rearranging itself. The way she had not seemed surprised when I sat down that first Saturday. The way she had known I had come back on Wednesday. The look she had given me across the café the first morning, not the look of someone who had noticed a stranger, but of someone who had been waiting to see if I would appear. You knew my routine, I said. Your general patterns, yes. And you engineered an introduction. I created an opportunity, she said. I thought that was different. Did you think that before or after? She did not answer immediately. Before. And then you sat down at that table on Saturday, and it was different from what I had expected, and then I could not figure out what to do with that. I almost said something sharp. I had the shape of it ready. Instead, I just felt tired and a little cold and extremely clear-headed in the specific way that only bad surprises produce. I need a few days, I said. She nodded. She did not argue. You should have them. A cab came up Burrard. I flagged it and got in without looking back. Through the window as the car pulled away, I could see her still standing there on the sidewalk, very straight, hands in her coat pockets, watching the cab without moving. I sat with it for 2 days. I went through the normal motions, 2 client calls, a proposal draft, a lunch I barely registered eating. I kept coming back to the same point in the memory. Her at that window table, already there, already waiting, the whole thing arranged like a stage set I had wandered onto without a script. It mattered. I did not want it to matter less, just because the rest of it had been good. I was not interested in being the person who looked past a thing like that, just because looking past it was easier. She had manufactured the beginning. That was real. But the other parts were real too, and I kept finding I could not put them aside. The way she closed the notebook the first time I sat down. The way she said, "You said it," just quietly, like she had been paying closer attention to me than I had been to myself. The event. How she kept appearing at exactly the moment I needed extraction, and how natural it felt, like we had worked out a system without discussing it. The way she had told me the truth at the exact moment it might have cost her everything. She could have said nothing. I would not have known. The evening would have ended cleanly. We would have moved forward, and the whole construction would have stayed hidden behind everything that came after. She had told me anyway. On Saturday afternoon, I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Meet me at Anchor and Grind," I said. 1 hour. A short pause. "Okay." When I arrived, she was already there. Not at the window this time, a different table near the middle, which I noticed. No notebook, no phone, face up, nothing on the table except her cortado and her hands folded around it. She looked less organized than I had ever seen her. Not disheveled, but like the control she normally wore had gone slightly off center and she had not fixed it. I got my coffee. I sat across from her. She did not speak first, which was not typical. "You built the whole opening," I said. "You chose the cafe, the timing, the positioning. You watched me walk in and let me think the look was chance." "Yes," she said. "And when I came back, every time I came back, you already knew why." "Yes." "That hurt," I said. She did not flinch, and she did not rush to fill it. She sat with it. "It made me go back over everything," I said. "Every conversation, the event, the morning after. I kept trying to figure out what was real and what was architecture." "I understand that," she said. "I need you to actually hear it," I said. "Not just acknowledge it." She looked at me directly. Her jaw moved once, like she was swallowing something. "I hear it," she said. "I am not going to defend it. What I did to start it was wrong. You deserve to know who was in the room." I looked at my coffee, then at her. "The rest of it felt real," I said. "It was. The notebook, the event, your kitchen." "All of it," she said. Her voice dropped slightly. "I have not let a morning feel that uncalculated in a very long time. I did not know what to do with that except disappear, and I know that was also wrong." "2 wrong things in a row," I said. "Yes." I sat with that. Outside the window, someone walked a dog past in the gray December light. The cafe made its usual sounds behind us. "If we do this," I said, "I need to be someone you trust with the actual information, not someone you manage." "I know." "I'm serious. You cannot decide what I get to know because it fits the plan better." "I know," she said again, and then, quieter, "I was afraid." It was the first time I had heard her use that word about herself, not in a way that asked me to feel sorry for her, just plainly as a fact. "Afraid of what?" I asked. "That I had manufactured the beginning so well that there was no version of the truth that wouldn't end it," she said, "and that ending it would be the first thing in a long time that I actually didn't want." She reached into the inside pocket of her coat and took out a small folded piece of paper. She set it on the table between us and slid it over without a word. I unfolded it, 5 words, written in the same neat, deliberate hand that was on everything she wrote. No plan this time. Just us. I read it twice. Then I folded it along the same creases and put it in my jacket pocket. We start from this point, I said, not from the cafe, not from the hotel, not from anything before this table, from here. She nodded, and for the first time since the night at Ancora, her shoulders came down a fraction. We sat together in the middle of the cafe. Not the window, not the seat she had chosen the first morning with everything already arranged, just a table we had picked because it was open. The cortado and the Americano. The 2 of us, no other setup. The morning felt ordinary in a way I had not expected, and that was exactly what made it feel like something had finally actually begun. I keep coming back to one detail. Not the revelation outside Ancora, not the 3 days of silence, not even the note with 5 words on it. I keep coming back to the moment Rowan closed her notebook the first time I sat down at that table. She did not make anything of it. She just set the pen down and left it there. And I noticed, and she knew I noticed, and neither of us said a word about it. That small thing was real. I am certain of it, and I think that is what I had to decide. Not whether the beginning was clean, because it was not, but whether one dishonest opening could hollow out everything that followed. I decided it could not because I was letting her off easy, but because I had actually been paying attention, and what I had seen since that first Saturday was a person choosing, slowly and against her own instincts, to stop managing and start trusting. What Rowan did at the start was wrong. I said it clearly at that table, and I meant it. You do not get to research someone's routine, position yourself in their path, and then let them believe the whole thing was fate. That is a kind of manipulation, even when the intention behind it is just to create an opening. She knew that. The fact that she told me, when she absolutely did not have to, when silence would have been so much easier, was the first genuinely honest thing in the whole arrangement. And honesty that costs you something is a different kind of honesty than the kind that costs you nothing. I think about what it takes to do what she did at that restaurant. Not the engineering of the cafe meeting. That part required research and nerve, but not much vulnerability. The hard part was sitting across from me at Ancora, hands flat on the table and saying, I did this, I was wrong, and I am telling you now, because you deserve to know, even if it ends everything. That took something I did not fully have a word for at the time. It was not bravery in the dramatic sense. It was more like the decision to stop protecting yourself when you finally care more about the other person's reality than your own safety. Her father lost almost everything because he trusted without paying attention. She spent years building systems to make sure that would never happen to her. I understand that. I grew up watching people in Thunder Bay work hard and still lose things they had earned. And I responded by getting very good at work that kept me in control of outcomes. We had both made our defenses and called them discipline. What I learned, and I am still learning it, honestly, is that discipline is not the same thing as wisdom, and control is not the same thing as care. Rowan had both discipline and intelligence in abundance. The thing she had to build, the harder thing, was the willingness to stay in a situation she had not planned, when the plan had already fallen apart. That is what I saw in her at the end. Not the system she had built around herself, but the person choosing, with some effort and a small piece of folded paper, to set it down. I do not know exactly where we are headed. I know we sat at a table neither of us had picked for any particular reason, and that the coffee was fine, and that for the first time in a long time neither of us was managing anything. That felt like enough of a start.